Shalom, welcome to Rob on the Rock. I'm Rob Vanoff, and today I want to look at very important words spoken by Yeshua from the cross. It's in the Aramaic language. It's a citation of Psalm 22. We'll go in depth. We'll look at the Hebrew original, a few different Aramaic versions, some versions in Greek as well. Let's dive in. We're going to compare the Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek versions of the opening of Psalm 22, cited by Yeshua on the cross as recorded in the Gospels of Matthew and Mark. We'll start with the Masoretic Hebrew. Now, we don't have this passage in the Dead Sea Scrolls, so we're going to look directly at the Masoretic tradition, which begins, Eli, Eli, Lama Azavtani. Eli, Eli, Lama Azavtani. That means my El, or my God, my God. Lama is why. Azavta. Azavta is you have forsaken. Azavti, I have forsaken. Azavta, you have forsaken. And then the ni, nun yod at the end. Ni, that's me. Azavta ni. Why have you forsaken me? That's the Masoretic text. The Aramaic Targum that we have preserved starts the same. Eli, Eli, Matulma, Matulma. Now, Matulma in one dialect of Aramaic is the same as Lama. Matulma, for what reason? Shabaqthani, Shabaqthani. So the Shin Bet Kuf, Shabak, is the same meaning as azav, ayin, zayin, bet. It means to leave or to forsake. So shavakta means you have left or forsaken. And the ni is the similar ending. Shabaqthani is you have left me or forsaken me. So we can see that the ancient Aramaic Targum, which may have its roots in the Second Temple era, or it might be a later dialect of Aramaic, Matulma. For what reason? The ancient Septuagint has, of course, just a Greek translation, hateos, hateosmu. So hateos is where we get the word theology, right? Theta, as that word the, or the letter the, theos. Here it's in what we call the vocative case, which looks just like the nominative, hateos, hateosmu, my, O God, oh my God. Proschesmoi means hear me, pay attention to me. Proschesmoi, which of course is not translated from any Hebrew or Aramaic text. It is inserted, proschesmoi. Hinati enkatelepesme. Enkatelepesme. It means in order, or for what reason have you left me? For what reason have you forsaken me? Question mark. So now we've seen the ancient Hebrew, the ancient Greek, and an Aramaic translation. We're going to transition now and look at the Gospels over against the Septuagint. In Matthew's Gospel and in Mark's Gospel, we find this phrase. And what I have here as AT is Aramaic transliteration, because what we have in the Greek is not Greek language, but Aramaic language in Greek letters. So we call that a transliteration. And then what I have as GT here is Greek translation. So the AT, Aramaic transliteration, GT, Greek translation. And we'll have the same thing in Mark. AT, Aramaic transliteration, GT, Greek translation. So let's look at Matthew first. And each one of these we're going to compare with the Septuagint. The Aramaic transliteration preserved in Matthew is Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. Now, if we allow the sigma to be pronounced as a shin, as Aramaic speakers would know, they would say Eli, Eli, lama Shabaqthani. Very close to the Hebrew, Eli, Eli. If you remember, that's exactly what the Hebrew has, is Eli, Eli, lama. Eli, Eli, lama. Well, Matthew begins the same way as the Hebrew. Eli, Eli, lama. Slight different vocalization, le instead of la for the lama. But instead of Azavtani, we have the expected Aramaic. If it weren't for this word, we would not know whether Eli Eli Lama was Aramaic or Hebrew. It's right along with the Hebrew. The only difference is this, the root used for the verb forsake or leave. Shabaqthani is Aramaic, Azavtani would be Hebrew. And then the Greek in Matthew is translated theemu, hinatime enkatelepes. Okay, so here we have the same verb, enkatelepes, right? Same that we have here, you have forsaken. The me, which is the direct object, me, is moved before the verb, which is totally fine. And instead of hinati, we have it in one word, hinati, not a big deal. But notice it diverges, whereas the Septuagint uses a nominative, hatheasmu, as a kind of vocative. The Greek actually uses a proper vocative, theemu, and it uses it twice. My God, oh my God, oh my God. So the Greek translation of Yeshua's Aramaic is actually closer to the Hebrew than the Septuagint Greek. It's not the same. It has the roughly the same meaning, but we see quite a difference in precision of words used. So just one more point to say that again, is that Matthew's Aramaic transliteration of Yeshua's words tracks almost precisely with the Hebrew, except for the verb. And it's by that verb we know this is Aramaic, Shabaqthani, whereas the Hebrew would be Azavtani. And the Greek translation tracks precisely both with the Aramaic transliteration and the Hebrew Masoretic text, theemu, my God, the mu is my. And we see it tracking precisely with the original Hebrew and with the Aramaic, whereas the Septuagint diverges. It only has mu once, oh God, my God, and then inserts this prosches moi, attend to me or hear me. Now that we've seen that Matthew is a completely independent of the Septuagint tradition, it draws on an Aramaic tradition that is precisely with the Hebrew, both in transliteration of the Aramaic and the translation provided. Now let's turn our attention to the Gospel of Mark, where we find it slightly different. Eloi, Eloi, lema Shabaqthani. Almost precisely the same as is preserved in Matthew, except we have an omega, Eloi, Eloi, lema, which means it's just a different way of saying my God. Eloah is a name for Elohim, Eloah, and you can just put the suffix on there, Elohai, or Eloi, totally fine. It means the same thing, my God, why have you forsaken me? But notice the Greek translation of Mark's transliteration is a little closer to the Septuagint, hatheasmu, except the mu is twice. So it tracks well with the Eloi, hatheosmu. And then instead of the hina clause, hinati, like we see in the Septuagint, we have esti. For what reason? So in all these instances, the meaning is the same. But what we're noticing with the tradition captured in the Gospels of Matthew and Mark is that the Aramaic transliteration of Yeshua's words is much more closer to the Hebrew than to the Greek transmission of it, and even closer tracked Aramaic translation than what is preserved in the Aramaic Targum. Now, there's one more place we can look, and that is the Peshitta. In the Peshitta, which is an Aramaic translation of the Tanakh and of the Gospels and New Testament, quote unquote, and they're from different times. So the Peshitta of the Tanakh is much earlier than the Peshitta of the New Testament. But for fun, let's take a look and we'll compare those. So what we have here now is we still have Matthew on top, then Mark, and we have the Hebrew again and the Aramaic Targum like we saw above. Eli, Eli, Lama, Azavtani. The Aramaic, Eli, Eli, Matulma, Shabaqthani. But let's look at the Peshitta Psalm. So the Peshitta for Psalm 22, Eloi, Eloi, Lamana Shabaqthani. So we see that the Peshitta Psalm has something close to what Mark has, Eloi, Eloi. And instead of Lama, the Peshitta Psalms has Lamana, Lamana. Same meaning, it's just a slightly different dialectical variation. Eloi, Eloi, Lamana Shabaqthani. So the Aramaic quoted in Mark is very close to what we find in the Peshitta of Tehillim, of Psalms 22. Now let's look at the Peshitta Gospels. There's been people who have sold a lot of books teaching that the Peshitta of the apostolic writings is the original. That's nonsense. Don't listen to it for a minute. It's wrong. If you want, I have written a review of one of those translations. I'd be happy to share it with you if you send me a note. But notice here, this is, if this was original, this would be quite silly. It says, Il, Lamana Shabaqthani. Well, Il just is this late Syriac way of spelling the word El, God. Il. It doesn't have any suffix, so it doesn't say my God, which clearly Matthew and Mark, Eli, the Yoda at the end here, Eloi, or Eloi, however we want to vocalize that. It means my God, and we know that by the actual translation provided in the apostolic tradition, Deimu, or hateosmu. That's explaining to the Greek audience what this means. My God. Well, the Peshitta Gospels does not retain that tradition. It just says Il, God. So the Peshittas, of all that we've looked here, the Peshitta Gospels is the farthest away from the Hebrew and the Aramaic and the Greek. And there's plenty of other reasons why the Peshitta Gospels are not even close to being something original. But wanted to share that with you today. So these words of Yeshua on the cross, Eli, Eli, lama Shabaqthani, they were uttered in Aramaic by our Lord, and they are indeed the beginning of Psalm 22. So during this Pesach season, be sure to read through Psalm 22 and reflect on its meaning with respect to who Yeshua is and what he came to accomplish. Happy Pesach.